Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Saksham
Saksham
Dutta
Dutta
podcast.
podcast.
So today we are gonna talk about the American stock market. Before that, first I would like to introduce to my guests, Nishant, Atulya, and Utkarsh. So starting with our podcast,
Thanks, Saksham. I'm very excited to discuss the world's most influential market, and you got to understand that that is the United States stock market.
Absolutely. The US market is a driving force for global finance.
But let's break it down for the listeners.
why the US stock market matters globally. So, Utkarsh, why does the US stock market matters globally?
For one, you got to understand that it's massive. It's massive, it's big, and it makes a huge difference in the world. You know, it makes up 40% of the world's stock value, right? Number one. Number two, movements there, they propagate and impact markets worldwide. You got to understand that that is what happens. It's very important. What do you think of those numbers, Saksham? 40%.
Utkarsh, those are big numbers. But what does it mean for an investor in India? Should they really care about what happens in the US market?
If I'm being honest, I think that investors in India should look at it from a very fresh perspective, right? Did he invest there? Did he invest there? Yes or no? You know, like, for example, the politicians, they're always going to be driving, and we're going to be discussing this later in the podcast, but they're always going to be driving the consumer sentiment of Indian investors, right? And so, Nishant, can you add on to some global giants which outsource from India and make the Indian economy, fuel the Indian economy, and are some of the largest listed shares in the American stock market?
Yes, of course. Global giants such as Apple and Amazon are listed internationally as well as influencing international economies.
That's great point, Nishant. With so many factors at play, it can get overwhelming for new investor. But would you say one of these drivers hold more weight than the others?
I personally think that if we're talking about weight and how much weight that some of these drivers hold, and you have to understand the sentiment of the Americans, right? You have to understand how society there works, you know, what they believe in, what they breathe in, breathe out. You know, I think a lot of what they really care about is the US dollar. And the US dollar is the backbone of most of the world. So many currencies are pegged to it, right? And you know, when you have so many currencies that are pegged to it, you know, you have such an oily economy like they have, I think it's important that we understand just how strong the US dollar is. So Atulya, I think you can add on more to that.
Yeah, I think the pegging part is really important, and the US dollar being the reserve currency ties global finance to the American markets.
Yes, and economic data and Federal Reserve policies are critical. Rates, growth, and spending shape trends.
Yep, and then there's corporate earnings and geopolitical events like trade wars, fund wars, drug wars, all these that play a huge role in the American stock market. And even stuff like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, all of these.
Yeah, and as Utkarsh said, investor sentiment is really important. I mean, we saw what happened with the protests, George Floyd, and everything. So it's really important to have an idea about the fear and optimism that exists in the market today.
True, very true.
So, in conclusion, I would like to say that the investor sentiment matters too. So, what they think, that also matters. Moving on to the next. Who
Yep.
are the major players, Utkarsh?
Very good question. So the way that the American stock market works is you have couple of major players, and what we call these are market makers. You know, you have companies like Citadel, you have companies like that who do high frequency trading and make sure that the liquidity of the market stays well. But then you also have companies like Vanguard, BlackRock, etc., which are large asset management companies, and they're the ones who put out ETFs, mutual funds, and they dominate with their large volumes of trades. All these corporate institutions as well, investment banks. So you know, let's talk a little bit more about retail investors where people can buy, you know, coins, people can buy stocks, you know, you can make your own, you can kind of really make your own footing in a place where, you know, people are getting kneeled on and like, yeah.
I would like to ask Nishant to talk about some hedge funds.
Yep. So platforms, Nishant, I think, you know, what he's talking about is platforms like Robinhood, right, that are influenced by hedge funds, etc. Can you give us some more insight into those?
Yes, of course. As you mentioned, retail investors are rising, and platforms like Robinhood, as Utkarsh mentioned, have given more influence to such investments, as seen by the GameStop saga.
GameStop is such an interesting example. Nishant, it really showed how retail investors can shake things up. Do you think this is a shift in power will last, or it is just a trend?
So I think about that short squeeze, Atulya should add some insight because he is sort of I would say kind of an expert when it comes to that like area of
He
of
solidified
the economy. He
he solidified his alpha certification.
his presence there. So like yeah, would you like to add on to that GameStop saga?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen that these consumer platforms have added a lot of unpredictability. They've made markets more dynamic, and specifically with things like crypto, there's so many more scams. I mean, we recently saw the Hawk coin and what happened to it. So
Rug pulling.
Yeah, rug pulling is very common.
Yeah.
So it's added a lot more unpredictability, and there's a lot more ways of making money with stocks. But you also have to be a lot more careful about where you're investing your money.
Very true.
So you should think that your capital as at risk. So basically, you should think and invest like wisely. Now, I would like to ask Atulya, how can someone from India invest in the US stock market?
I mean, there's a lot of methods out there. You can use brokerage accounts, you can use ETFs, mutual funds, or direct or indirect exposures to the U.S. stocks. So just creating an account in the U.S., for example.
So like for example, how do you because you're someone who's lived in India, then now you've moved to a place like Dubai, which is like financial kind of, you could say, intermediary. Then you also have lived now in a place like Boston, where you see a lot of big things and big deals go down. A lot of there's like behemoth of trades going on there. So like, how would you say, how do you invest? Someone like you who's from India and now moved there.
Just came outside.
I personally don't invest in
Yeah.
the stock market. I prefer gambling. That's usually what I do. I prefer sports betting. That's like my favorite. I bet on a lot of basketball games, a lot of soccer games. So that's usually how I invest my money.
That's a great advice, Atulya, for someone just starting out. Though the US stock market can feel a bit daunting. How should a beginner decide between direct stocks and ETFs? Now I would like Utkarsh to talk about ETFs.
So when we're talking about direct stocks versus ETF, I think one thing you have to understand is like, if you're going directly to the stock market to buy a stock, right? You are you're pulling all of your money into one company, right? You don't
Yes.
know what's going to happen next. You don't know when that company can go like underground. When let me put it in this way, right? When you're buying an ETF, you're buying like you're buying a slice of each pie, right? Like in the sense that when you are purchasing an ETF, it's the 500, for example, the SPY 500. It is the S&P 500's ETF, which is the list of the 500 best companies in the world, right? Or not, sorry, I should say in the United States. But the good thing is, these companies always have a lot of backing, but if you're investing in a direct stock, it can always go breathless. And then what do you do? Right? If it goes bankrupt, what do you do? So
Yeah.
that's what I feel.
The ones among us, yes.
Now I would like Atulya to give some insights.
So just remember, guys, we are not certified financial investors or analysts that can give you advice. So this is not financial advice. This is just based on the research that we've done and what we believe are the best methodologies to invest in the US stock market and how it affects people in India. So yeah, I would definitely recommend doing your own research, looking into every single resource that's out there on both sides, on every part of the stock market, and definitely making your own decisions.
Yes, we're simply just puffing our ideas and combing through our thoughts. On to you, Saksham.
That's it for today. Thank you for watching Saksham Dutta podcast.